Hi, Bob Wells here, and welcome to another edition of the Undercurrent Stories podcast. In today's show, we're going to be looking at how the transformative power of street art can help communities regenerate. We'll discover the unique impact of visual art on mental health and well-being, and we'll explore how engaging with art programmes can revitalise and strengthen communities. For emerging artists, we learn valuable tips, and we also uncover the intriguing world of transit art and its role in urban expression. I hope you enjoy today's show. In today's show, I'm joined by Alisha Miller and Nathan Parker from Grit. Grit is an artist-led programme of creativity which will culminate in a spectacular event showcasing art, theatre and music on the 11th of August 2024 in the Midlands town of Nuneaton, Warwickshire in England. Hello and welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hello.
Great to have you guys on. Thank you ever so much for coming on the show. What I was going to say was, before we talk about your art and specifically the show, could you just sort of introduce yourselves, please, and just tell us about your life's journey and how you became interested in art? Who's going to go first?
We'll do it alphabetically.
Yeah, let's go alphabetically. I'm a visual artist. I've been a practicing artist since 1998, which is when I started having my first solo exhibitions as a painter. And along with paintings, I made vinyl images, which I would hand cut, and they were predominantly around images of women, autobiographical stories, and sort of exploring what's now known as the male gaze. But I think at the time I probably wasn't thinking of it as that, but I was just trying to explore sort of our sort of internal being, but externally through naked images of women. And then quite quickly after that, I responded to an Arts Council brief for the year 2000, where they did Year of the Artist, and they were looking to place 1,000 artists in 1,000 unusual spaces. And I'd just been working in industry and doing a bit of teaching, as well as sort of finding myself as an artist. I studied printed textile design, but kind of knew once I'd done that I didn't want to make design. And so I wrote this project to explore women's working roles in male-dominated environments, because I wanted to go into warehouses and factories, because they were the industries that were around me, living in Nuneaton. And I decided to use a lorry as my canvas so I could take art to the non-art audience, to the people that didn't go to galleries. So that's where transit art started, which is something I do dip in and out of through my career, as well as making commissioned work, and I still try and paint as often as I can as well.
It must be quite a task painting a whole lorry, Alisha.
Well, the first time I made a lorry, I did paint it. And then the second lorry I made, I drew on it. And I literally created a design on my computer. I had it scaled up at a printer's to the same size as the lorry. And we're talking an articulated lorry trailer here, which are like 13 metres by 2.5 metres. And I then bought loads of packets of carbon paper and sellotaped them all together to make like a double A0 sheet. And I traced this image, me and a friend of mine. We traced this drawing actually onto the curtain using this carbon paper, which is a pretty old-fashioned technique, really. Yeah. Because back in 2002, you couldn't really print on curtains. That technology wasn't around. And I used a very, very thin vinyl, sticky back vinyl that was used in the sign industry but it was called Class 2 reflective. So it looked black, but if you shone a car headlight onto it, it would glow white. So it was a medium that could be seen 24 hours if you took it out onto the roads at night. So I made these really, really fine figurative drawings of lorry drivers, which are called truckers' pin-ups. And then on the other side of the lorry, I made a huge landscape. So I did all that by hand.
Wow.
But now I design it on the computer, and a company will print it for me and wrap it for me.
And the term transit art, is this something that was popular before you did it, or were you one of the innovators of it, Alisha?
Yeah, I think I only ever saw one other artist that had made a piece on a trailer, and he'd put a photograph on and a bit of poetry on the back. And other than that, there was another guy that used to draw into the dirt onto the back of trailers. And that's kind of about it in this country. It happens, in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
And Indian lorries are just highly decorated. They're really beautiful. But I try and use the space as an artwork rather than an advert. So
yes,
it's about blurring those boundaries and sort of taking over those spaces and trying to, shift our consciousness around being affected by consumerism constantly.
Yeah. And what sort of reaction do you get from the drivers when they're asked to take a lorry out with this wonderful artwork on it?
Yeah. So I think that the first drivers I worked with, because the artwork was fairly abstract, I think they probably weren't too sure about it. And then the second artwork, because it actually featured them as the pin-ups, they just thought it was a bit of a laugh, really. They did quite enjoy it. But I did a series of 10 artworks in Lincolnshire, and one of them had the Battle of Britain flight on, because I used to speak to people and they would give me stories, and those stories informed the work. And the artwork was around the working landscape in that area. And I know drivers just would really, really want to drive that particular lorry more than all of them. But yeah, they're quite proud of it, and they do get a lot of attention. So it does make your day at work a little bit different.
Yeah, I bet. And is there any way of gathering feedback from passers-by? Because I suppose a lot of the time, you see the lorry go past, you have a quick look at it in a traffic jam maybe, and that's it. But do you ever get any feedback from people? You do?
Yeah. Only 2 weeks ago, one of the actors from Nuneaton that we recently saw in Simon's pantomime followed one of my lorries down the M6 and actually then followed it back again on his way home from South, which never happens. I mean, you barely ever see one in real life as it is, but to see the same one twice there and back. And that was 2 weeks ago. And those lorries have been on the road probably about 8 years now.
Wow. Yeah.
So, yeah, people send me photos.
Well, thanks for that. And Nathan, it'd be great to hear your story as well. Thank you.
Okay, so interested in drawing from an early age, really. Both my parents were draftspeople, so there's all art tools around. Kind of got into that, and a big change for me was when I was a teenager and the New York hip-hop culture came over via books, a book by Henry Chalfant and Martha Cooper called Subway Art, and a couple of movies that came over. And I just fell in love with the whole hip-hop culture, the music, the dancing, and the graffiti art that was on the trains that was so prevalent during the 70s and 80s in New York. So I thought, oh, this is interesting. It's got artwork involved. It's spray painting. So I had to go do it myself and kind of fell in love with that process. Managed to get quite a few commissions in my teenage years, really, and then went to art school, same art school as Alisha, and then ended up going and getting a degree in illustration. And after I finished this degree, I didn't really get much illustration work, but I still got a bit of spray paint work. Then went between different jobs, just surviving, getting money, keeping going. But in the last sort of 15, 20 years, the spray painting has kind of taken over and become full-time. So a lot of commercial work, painting for clubs, bars, youth clubs, schools, hotels. And that's kind of kept me going, really. So quite a commercial art background, and then occasionally get to do my own thing, whether it's I just choose to do it off my own back or get invited to many different street art festivals that have turned up in the last few years. Really enjoying that. So, yeah, that's kind of my journey so far, and this feels a little bit more self-indulgent, a bit more exploratory, this grit thing, but it's in a good way.
Yeah,
yeah. It's quite a good time for me, really.
Oh, well, thank you, Nathan. It's really interesting. Just before we talk about grit, I know we had a quick conversation before we went on air, but the fine line between sort of graffiti and designated street art, is there a fine line between it? How do you see it?
I think there's a bit of a line there. I think it's a cultural thing, really. It's more to do with aesthetics. I mean, I guess if you take on a base level, you could say graffiti's the illegal act of writing your name, I guess, and street art, it can be illegal, but it can also be illegal murals and stuff, I guess. But aesthetically, I think it is, the way we look at it in modern culture, is the graffiti thing connects back to the New York trains, the New York graffiti that was around the city, New York, the tagging, the piecing, the painting walls, which was letter-based, putting your name up, getting your name around the town, getting your name around the city. There's a big culture around that. There's a lot of unspoken rules that go with that, which that the people who kind of ran with that, like myself, that's graffiti to them. That's the culture they see. Whereas we see street art more as something that's emerged more recently, I guess. It's more, I would say, a more acceptable side where it's more figurative, more painterly, more illustrative. Those sort of elements, and it involves things like stencils and paste ups and not the traditional sort of letter writing that we've got associated with the New York stuff. That's the biggest sort of distinguisher I see now. I mean, you could argue the different points on this, and people might have different views on it. But that's the kind of basic feel I get there. You definitely get two camps when you go to these street art festivals, and there's one which is the writing graffiti camp, and then there's the sort of street art camp, and there is a bit of crossover, but basically that's the difference. If that makes it any clearer, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I think some of the street art is absolutely fantastic, and it can brighten up a wall, a disused wall. From my own perspective, I've always been interested in ghost signs.
Yes.
So we had a chap on a few months ago who specialises in ghost signs, and I went on a tour with him with a group of people down in London, and you look at these old advertising signs that have, shall we say, weathered and discoloured over time. And for me, they're lovely because they still retain, they make you think of the time in which they were put up. So you might have one going back to the 1950s or the 40s. But you can see how time's eroded them, and the fonts that are used, we don't use anymore, that sort of thing. And I remember having this conversation with the chap saying, for me, it's almost like art because it's something that does something to you when you look at it. And we had an interesting debate about that as to whether it was art or whether it wasn't art. And some of the ghost sign aficionados, stroke, people who love them or hate them, or whatever, they have this. Some people think it's art, other people don't, and it's interesting. So, is that? Are you familiar with ghost signs? Is it something that you look at?
Yeah, I mean, the craftsmanship involved with them is fantastic, isn't it, really? I've had a few people approach me to say, come and restore these, and I'm very the idea of, I don't think you should restore ghost signs. I think you should let them go. I think that's part of the thing. Yeah. If you try and paint it back how it was, you've lost what it is.
Yes.
The art that we do, I think all of us want grit, is kind of transient. We've embraced this idea that it won't last forever. It's in a moment. It's in a moment of time. And that's what kind of makes it more beautiful. It means you should experience it the same way you'd experience it like a flower or a bird song or something like that. It's not going to be there all the time.
No.
And the ghost song is definitely evocative of that. And that when you look around, you can kind of see this history. There's quite a few around Nuneaton, isn't there, Alisha?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Are there?
Yeah.
Oh, right. I'll have to come over and have a look.
I've had a few people, like I say, could we get this back? Because they do, in some of the places they're fading a lot faster where it's facing the sun. But I'm a strong believer you should just kind of leave them be and let them just take photos if you want a record of it, and it's going to be gone at some point. Yeah. But enjoy it while it's the case. Enjoy the beauty of that.
Okay, so grit. I've read an awful lot about it. There's an awful lot we could talk about, but basically, could you just sort of describe how grit came about and what its purpose and goals are, please?
Yeah. So Simon and I had been to quite a few meetings together over the years. Simon Winterman, who is a theatre director, he's our third member of Grit. He, like us, he takes his theatre out of the traditional theatre setting. I work out the gallery, and so does Nathan. And so our paths had been crossing at various meetings because we've been trying to get things happening creatively in Nuneaton. We've all three of us have been professional artists living and working in Nuneaton for well over 20 years, and we just do it despite everything. We just do it. We just do what we like doing, and we find ways and means of doing that. But I think all three of us did go to the same art school, and back in the 80s, Nuneaton Art School had a really good reputation. We had lecturers from the Royal Academy, and our grounding and our training was incredible, and so arts were really valued back then. But over the years, the art schools moved. Like art schools over the country, they've sort of got smaller and smaller and had less funding. And so I'd sort of joined Simon on a journey trying to sort of have a new theatre built and art centre in the town. And we'd all been to lots of different meetings. And I think we were this opportunity came up through as a response to a big project that Artichoke and Imagineer did with Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council in 2021, I think. It was a memorial to COVID, and they had a big sculpture made that was designed to burn, and it was sort of catharsis to the memory of COVID and people's lives. And 10,000 people stood in the park in Bedworth and witnessed this sculpture set alight. And it's like, oh my God, 10,000 people are looking at art in Bedworth. They might not know they are. Some of them will. But there's just a hunger for it. And there's been an underground scene always there. And so we were approached as the few professional artists that live and work here to, maybe take on a follow-up project. And so we were asked what we wanted to do. And we did it. Well, we're doing it.
Started.
Yeah. So, Imagineer Productions, Jane Heitch from Imagineer Productions has been really instrumental in helping us sort of forge this path. But the council have been really supportive as well, and sort of their partnership in the whole project.
And what are the council wanting? What's their purpose for it? What do they think that will be achieved by the project? Well, I think it's probably our job to tell them what they need, really. I think councils probably have a tough time understanding, like lots of people understanding what the value of arts is in society and who it's for. Yeah.
And so we think our job is to help everybody experience something that maybe they don't get the opportunity to experience often enough.
Yeah.
So arts and culture can be made more readily available in towns like Nuneaton.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I was reading only the other day, actually, that Nuneaton was described as one of the country's areas of low-level cultural engagement by the Arts Council. I'm not sure how they found that out, or what they used to measure it, but that was interesting that they said that.
Yeah, we've been on that levelling up list for a while now.
Yeah,
and so we've now got the opportunity to try and change that level of engagement and that opportunity.
Yeah.
How long has Grit been in existence now?
About a year, it's just over, isn't it, I guess? So, yeah, we've had a building since late October, but conceptually, probably a bit longer than a year, maybe about a year and a half. But we've had these discussions and meetings. We're having a space now in the town. It's been about 5 months.
And what sort of response do you get from the public?
Generally, it's usually pretty good, to be honest. Those that walk through the door, we have a front-facing shop in the on a high street, so which wasn't estate agents. A lot of people will come in and say, "Well, what was this before?" Because I think a few people scratch their heads because we're not selling anything. They come in and go, "Well, what are you selling? What can I buy from here?" But then once they open that conversation up, they realise we're open to conversation as well, and it's a place to uncover creativity. But yeah, people who come through the door generally a positive response. They say, "Well, yeah, the town needs something like this. They need something." They recognise that a lot of the high street needs to be repurposed. There's a lot of empty shops in Nuneaton, like a lot of towns up and down the country.
Yeah.
And we're not going to go back to the way we used to be. Everyone buys online, or big supermarkets outside of town. So I don't think that's going to change. But we've got to work out what you're going to do with the town centres. Then do they become specialist shops? Do they become just full of coffee shops and meeting places, or do you repurpose these buildings? Do they become galleries and studios as well? And it's just nice to be involved in that conversation. That's what we kind of see ourselves as being part of that, the regeneration of the town centre. The response we're getting is pretty positive. I mean, I don't think it would be the same, say, if we were in somewhere like Stratford or Warwick, where they're kind of more aware of having galleries and spaces on the high street in front of them. I think they're a little bit more scratching their heads and sort of going, "Well, what is this?" Looking at us a little bit like, "I'm not quite sure where this is going." But we don't know that ourselves. But it's nice to start that conversation up, and I think this is getting people used to the idea of having art and artists in the town is very much part of the process we want to get involved with, and not just ourselves. We want to encourage other artists and other community spaces to exist.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds exciting, and the website, the Grit website, which we'll obviously put on the show notes, is full of stuff that you're doing. Portrait of a town, street art workshops. Is there anything that you'd like to share with listeners on some of those projects? Just sort of explain what they are and what can be expected from them.
So Nathan and I, we both paint people in our respective mediums, and
yes.
So we've never worked together before this project. We did go to art school at the same time, but that's 30 years ago. and we've been aware of each other's sort of artwork because we live in a small town. So when we thought about how we would bring our own projects to this, to Grit, we thought, well, it'd be really nice to collaborate on something. So we're both painting people in Nuneaton, people that are nominated, people that come in, people that we invite in, people that we ask to be drawn, people who have grit, people who have a story that they might want to tell us about, something that they're still believing in and being passionate about, despite everything, which is what we do. And so I'm painting, we're working on the same size canvases, and I'm painting in acrylics, which is what I often do, and Nathan is using Posca pens, acrylics and spray. So we're producing quite different pieces, which is really interesting, isn't it, Nathan? How people respond to what we're doing.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. For me, it's a bit of a scale down. So I'm normally painting quite big, so this is a bit of a scale down for me. Do
you take them for a photograph, or are they actually sitting down?
It's a bit of both. I mean, Alisha has done a lot more sitting with people, but I've done a bit of sitting, but I tend to take a photo. I am very have to be in the moment if I'm going to draw something. So I think the idea is to get a snapshot of the town. Like a kind of a year-long snapshot of people coming in and out, and this is hopefully we can make an archive of this and sort of say, well, this is what two artists responding to a load of people that are in town, and some of that is great because Alicia's done one of the market store owners, and everyone comes into the shop and goes, I know that face. I'll just point to a portrait. I know who that is, and sometimes they can't place who it is, but it's some of these people have been around town for a long time, so yeah.
Alisha, you mentioned grit there in terms of some of the people. And I was going to ask you, how did the name grit come about?
Well, two reasons. We kind of wanted to sort of give a nod to the geology of the town and the post-industry. So, we come from a town of miners, brickmakers. We're embedded, our geology is on granite. We've got a big quarry. Everywhere's a bit dirty.
Gravel and grit.
Gravel and grit. But we also like the personality trait of what grit means as well, and having to be, fairly passionate and determined, which is something that we must all have to keep going and doing what we do. Yes. So we just quite liked how those two words kind of spanned, who we are and where we are.
Yeah, I think so definitely from that grit, the quarry perspective. I think the grit was actually, I don't know, I'll have to look into the history a bit more, but I think that the Romans were actually digging the grit up to lay the A5, which runs pretty close to where we are. So
the Roman
historically,
road. Yeah.
The grit's kind of, one of the first things that got quarried here.
If we've got any listeners that, I know we're digressing away from the project, and I'd like to talk a bit more about that, but if we've got any listeners who, they like the idea of doing art, they perhaps did it at school, but it's gone, life's taken over or whatever. What advice would you give them about if they're sort of half-heartedly thinking about starting? What advice would you give them?
I'd say
Sketch Club.
Yeah. If they're in our town, come to Sketch Club. Come and chat to us. But I would definitely.
Sorry, Sketch Club is in Nuneaton, is it? Sketch Club is in Nuneaton.
Yes, it's an event we run twice. Once every 2 weeks on a Wednesday evening. Yeah. We put it together as just a place where creatives can kind of come along and do a little bit of drawing, chat about what they do, their practice. But it's growing nice, little community there. And for creatives, it's a bit of a space to go, I'm not going mad. I'm the one, I'm not the only person who feels like this or thinks they're doing something a bit strange. We can all get together and we have a nice little get together. People just sit there and draw. Some people just come and talk. Some people come and make things. It's been really interesting. It's been it's been a real success story it's an extra sort of thing we weren't really expecting to come out of the event, but because we've got this space in town, we think, well, how can we use this in extra ways? Yeah. So that's one of the things we've got. We've also got an exhibition space there as well, which is great because we can encourage artists who maybe they put art on the back burner, but they're creating art in their own home. You say, well, why don't you come? If you come and man this exhibition, put it up. We've got space you can do that in as well, which is great as well.
And if we've got any listeners who perhaps live in another country or away from Nuneaton, what advice would you give them if they want to get into art?
I think you've just do not put any pressure or expectation on yourself. Don't make art or draw or paint for any other reason than just the pure enjoyment of doing it. It doesn't, it's about practice. This is a sort of a mantra that we're trying to sort of share with people. You get better at stuff the more you do it. So the more you do it, you will be more pleased with what you're achieving. But then sometimes you might make a drawing that you don't think is any good. But if you share it with somebody and they really like it, then that's great. That's good enough, isn't it? So
yeah, it's about enjoying that process. It's allowing yourself to make mistakes.
It's great to hear that it's not, doesn't have to be a solitary pursuit. Yes, you can be on your own, doing your own thing and painting, but you can actually share it with other people and get some inspiration and support each other. That sounds really good.
Yeah.
I think that's where grit's been really important for all of us, and sort of the growing community of creatives around where we live, is that lots of us do it in isolation, and so it's really good to share it and share it actually physically with people.
Yes,
that's very different to sharing stuff online. It's a completely different experience. I know we can share stuff with hundreds of thousands of people, but I think being able to actually have a conversation with somebody about what you're doing, what you like doing, what you've been making is great.
And have you got any stories of people in Nuneaton who have really got into this? They've come along to either your sketch clubs, or they've been involved in where they've you've seen their eyes light up and they've been really motivated. And they sort of almost, they are now an artist. Have you seen any people?
There's a lot of little ones that are coming. Well, there's lots coming through. We've got one guy who used to stand outside when it's raining, and we've invited him in, and he says, I'm not creative. And this is a story we get a lot, is, well, I'm not creative. I'm not an artist. And then a few minutes later, you find out that he's been teaching music at schools for years, and he writes his own poetry, and the poetry is amazing. It's like, bring some of your poetry in. And it's changing this conversation. This is one of the things why I think Nuneaton is considered culturally a bit dead, is because the people in the town will kind of talk themselves down a bit and say, well, art's not for us, we're not artists. But when you start talking about, they show you amazing photos, the kids will come in and show you digital artwork they create on their phone, people will show you their poetry or talk about their songwriting and stuff. And we say, well, this is art, this is creativity, that's just how you frame it, really. So the poet guy's one for me, but we've had I've quite a few, haven't we, Alisha? Just sort of, I've done this because of you guys and stuff. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, Sketch Club is just definitely growing. Each session we just have more people, and there's just no pressure there. And there's no expectation, and nobody's in competition with each other. We're just all there to be together doing something that we like doing. Yeah. And so I think if you're given the opportunity to just do something that you like and you go, oh yeah, I did enjoy that, you'll do it again. And maybe sometimes that it's just offering that opportunity in the first place.
So I think we are lucky, me and Alisha and Simon, because we get paid as artists. And I think a lot of people pressure on it and say, well, I want to be a paid artist. And it's not always the route that everyone can take. I mean, a lot of people, life gets in the way, you just have to get on. And as I was saying earlier, a lot of my life I've spent not doing art. I've actually just paid my bills to get on. But I've kept art going. It's been there. And it's been a great tool for my mental health. And it's just getting this idea across that art is valuable. It's not just about making money. It can stay with you your whole life. The way you look at the world can change just if you've got art in your life, I think.
If art was taken away from you guys, do you think you would suffer?
Yes.
Yeah. So it definitely helps the mental health.
Yes.
It does. It does. And, sometimes you don't really realise that how important it is until you're not doing it.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, that's what the problem is then. I just need to... And and it's hard just to sit and make a drawing for no other reason than just to do it because you enjoy it, because it does feel self-indulgent, but it shouldn't feel like that. And like Nathan said, we are lucky. We've worked hard as well. We've worked really, really hard, and some jobs we get paid for where you know, when you're working to commission, you might not be doing exactly what you love doing, but, you know, there's a process within there. You're still being creative.
Yeah,
You're
this
still
is
using your own. Yeah, so creativity is a really, really wide thing to talk about.
Yes.
And sometimes it's absolutely 100% that you're in control of it and it's all about what you want to do. And sometimes, you know, you're paying your bills.
I guess if you're working on something that you've been commissioned for and you don't particularly like the idea, you're probably honing your craft at the same time, aren't you? With the materials you're using and the tools.
Yeah. I mean, all jobs are good experience. They really are. I mean, I'd say to any emerging artist, don't say no to anything when you're coming out, because you will find something in that job that excites you. And if you're being asked to do a commission, there's something about what you create anyway that the commissioner has seen in what you produce. So it's about finding a happy medium for everybody involved.
Yeah.
I think if you're just purely making work for yourself, it's probably the hardest way to make a living as an artist.
Classic idea of making money from a gallery is very hard to achieve, I think. So you do need to be commissioned artists. You need to sort of respond to a brief or, you know, those sort of things. But there are so many different avenues to take with creativity. That's one of the conversations we're having with people coming through is if you look at the way that robots and AI have gone into our lives now, the jobs like loading lorries and manual labour, they're going to be the things that go, really. There'll be things that suffer. But actual creative thought processes, so writing, you know, painting, drawing, having ideas, those are the things where we're going to flourish as humans. They're the things that are going to get us out of either problems in the future or, you know, progress or make us progress in the future. That's why I think art's really important, because it explores those creative ideas. It explores that aspect of problem solving, I guess. And it's having those conversations with young people coming through is like, you're not going to be able to just walk into a job now and have 40 years there and get retired just doing the same job day in, day out. No. It just doesn't exist like that now. So we've got to think of the future. We've got to work out how do we respond to that creatively, positively. You know, how do we get something out of this? And I think art's part of that conversation.
When you're coming up with a project or an artwork that isn't necessarily commissioned, but something that you want to do, is it something that you are sort of gestating for a while? Is the creative idea comes as a seed, and perhaps it might be a year before you actually do it, or so? Tell us how it works.
Well, for me, yeah, I have kind of ideas that kind of sit on, I think, and then they almost emerge by, I would say, almost like osmosis or something. They kind of grow. You take something on board and you think, well, I'm not sure about that, how that's going to come out. And then the opportunity might come along. But I think it's the practice of just doing it all the time. You kind of, that's the way things emerge. But it's allowing yourself to play as well, to be experimental. I think that's the way that ideas really develop. Because if you've got that involvement, sort of say, well, I can respond to the accident, or I can respond to something not going the way I wanted it to go. That's when creativity really begins to flourish, I think, because if you've got a very set idea, I might be wrong, some people are very good at setting out a set idea and reaching that systematically. But for me, it's a very almost chaotic response, I guess. It just kind of goes off this way, goes off that way, and I have to veer it in and then you know, hold it down for a bit and then let it be free for a bit. That's how ideas work with me. And a lot of the time they don't always work. That's allowing yourself that mistake making is important.
So you mean you might get halfway through something and you think, actually, I don't want to carry on with this. Does that happen?
Yes, I mean, sometimes just, you might just have to... I'm quite lucky with the medium I use. I'm a very impatient person with art, so with the spray paint, it dries quite quickly and I can cover it up quite quickly. So if I make a mistake, I can kind of get it covered. And a lot of the time when I'm painting somewhere, I've only got a day to do it. And when the sun's gone down, I have to be finished. I have to be out. It's somewhere else. Yeah. I don't live there, so I have to get on a train or whatever. I have to get home. So sometimes those time limitations mean I have to just embrace the mistakes and also just be able to just sort of walk away and say, well, that one didn't work, or you know, or that one worked better than the last one. Or
Alisha, how does the inspiration to finished project work for yourself?
Yeah, it's often something that's eating away at me, really. And it could just be something that's happening in the back of a sketchbook for many, many years that I don't share with anybody, I don't talk to anybody about. I often write in the back of a sketchbook and draw in the front of a sketchbook, and at some point it meets in the middle. And then for that to become a project, whether it's a funded project where you tend to then have to formulate this idea as a proposal with a budget and with a beginning, middle and an end, and then you share it with the world, and then somebody has to okay it, validate it, to give you the money to make it happen, or you just do something just because you want to do it anyway, for the love of it, and you want to take it out there. So I've done all of those approaches, and it all depends on the time being right, which might be having the time or feeling confident enough to take it, out there.
Yeah.
Open up the heart, as it were.
Yeah. So Grit is culminating, I think we said, on the 11th of August this year. What can visitors expect?
Well, we've got an event on the 11th of August. We're in the building till October, and we're hoping to generate more funding to continue. But our primary goal for the three of us is to bring our own practices to the town centre for an event day. So Nathan will be curating street art and street artists. Together we've been leading lots of street art workshops with young people who have been learning different techniques and making elements that will be part of a bigger piece of work. Simon is leading verbatim theatre, so he's working with communities to gather stories about their relationship of living in the town, and often working with people that are new to the town. And those stories will then be retold through theatre. He's also working with a physical theatre group that are called Dauntless Evolution, that are working with school children, and they'll be bringing a series of physical theatre productions to the day. I'm creating Convoy, so I'm bringing 5 articulated lorries to the town centre, and I'm currently working with people, landscape and industries that are innovative and on Nuneaton's doorstep. A little documentary film is being made of that process as well. So it's the first time I will be parking big lorries in the town centre for the day, and then they will go out and continue as working lorries, taking art inspired by, people in the industry in Nuneaton across the nation, hopefully. We've got a phone box we've adopted.
A phone box, that we've managed to adopt. That'll become an installation space, so that keeps changing every month or so, which that's a great one for public engagement, because people walk past and go, oh, that's changed again, and they just start having that conversation with them. And it was quite an unloved thing as well, broken windows, and it was very I'll say it was a red phone box, but it was more like a faded pink with green mould around it. Phone box. It kind of smelt of urine, because that was it was on the way back from the pub sort of place. But it's got a bit of love in it now, and it's that's a great little space, that is, isn't it? And then on the day itself, we're involving ourselves with all the community art groups that work in Nuneaton as well, giving them a sort of stage to put their, or a stall to put their stuff on and get involved with the day. It's very much about not just our art, but all of the different art that goes on. It's the creativity in the borough, and just sort of celebrating that. And we've got Morris dancers coming down and trying to get them to Morris dance to a bit of hip hop.
Why not?
So we're just trying to mash things up a little bit. Maybe have a bit of fun with it all.
So if there's any, are there any drivers or any companies that have got lorries that fancy a bit of artwork on them? Is that something that you could accommodate, Alisha?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, rigid refrigerated trailers are ideal, and drivers that would maybe like to be part of a major arts event that will have lots of publicity on the 11th of August in Nuneaton in the summer.
Excellent stuff. And is there, if there's anybody local, particularly to Nuneaton, that wants to get involved in this project, what should they do?
I mean, if they could walk in off the street, if they could see where we are, we're on Coventry Street, a place called Grit Art Central. They could walk in. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays are normally good days for us. We'd love to have a conversation with them. We've got a website. We've got an email on the website. There's a newsletter they can sign up for. We're looking for any creatives in the town. We're also looking for volunteers for the day. We run a sketch club, so we'd love people to come along to that too. So, yeah, if there's anybody in Nuneaton who knows anybody who's creative, please point them in our direction. We'd love to talk to them.
And where can people find out more about what you're doing?
We have a website, we're on Instagram, or Facebook.
So it's pretty much grit-art-central.co.uk is our website. And you can sign up to our newsletter, or all our contact details are on there to email us direct. Or just pop in.
That's fantastic. Well, this has been a really fascinating conversation. And it's been interesting to learn about your own art and what you do, and also how Grit's providing an opportunity for people to experience art, and also the positive benefits that it can provide, it can actually provide to the community. So my guests today have been Alisha Miller and Nathan Parker from Grit, which is a Nuneaton-based artist-led programme of creativity. And you can find out more about Grit on the Grit website, which can be found on the episode show notes. Thanks to you for coming on the show.
Yes, thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family, and if you have 60 seconds, I would be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.